Playing at Business with Steve Reece, the business podcast with a sense of fun. To find out more, go to playingatbusiness.com.
Hello, and welcome to episode 20 of the Playing at Business podcast. I'm your host, Steve Reece, and today I'm going to be talking to you about starting a new toy business and how to set it up for future success so that you can keep on growing and growing. Before we get on to that though, if you'd like to find out more about the toy and game industry, you can get news, analysis and insights via our toy and game trade blog sites, www.toyindustryjournal.com, surprisingly that's the toy business, and www.boardgamebiz.com, which is all about board games. You can sign up for a free email newsletter on those blog sites. We send out updates most Fridays, including notifications of new podcast episodes, articles, analysis, news, and all that kind of thing. If you do find this podcast or any of our content interesting or insightful, please do share it with your friends and colleagues in the business. The more people follow us, the more content we can basically provide, and we'd like to provide as much as people want. If you specifically need help to grow your toy game business, you can check out our consultancy services at www.kidsbrandinsights.com/services. That's www.kidsbrandinsight.com/services. That's all the upfront bit out of the way. So now we're going to get straight into how to successfully start a new toy business. Okay, so first let me outline some experiences we've had in our company which are, I guess, relevant to us being credible to advise on how to start a toy business with success, and then also, more importantly, to position it for future growth and kind of ongoing business. I myself have been on a couple of startup journeys, delivering tens of millions of dollars. Cumulative total revenues from these ventures I've never really added up, but I suspect it would be not far off $100 million US dollars. Maybe even a little bit more. One was in a corporate big company environment, and one was in a smaller company environment, albeit with excellent management and ownership oversight, I should state. Personally, I've kind of walked the path of a toy startup. There were obviously some innate advantages in having a corporate environment or kind of really strong management. So it was cheating a little bit, frankly, but it's a journey that I've kind of at least partly trod. Also, in terms of our company, Kids Brand Insight, we're now heading into our 10th year of consultancy to toy and game companies. We've helped more than 100 companies to grow, and again, I haven't really counted, but at least half of them, if not the majority, were fairly new companies. So we've also seen over time lots of companies succeed, and we've also seen, unfortunately, far more companies not make it. So just a bit of a kind of a preamble to hopefully establish a little bit of credibility. Now, I should also say this is not designed to be a long podcast. It's not an interview with someone like we often do, checking what they've done, finding out their kind of career story, projects they're working on, all that kind of stuff. And naturally, two-way conversations flow for longer and more loosely. So this is kind of just going to be a fairly punchy list of a number of factors that are the key recurring elements that we've seen in kind of failure and success in starting new toy and game companies. And that's basically what this podcast is going to be. So without further ado, so factor number one, research the market. Have a strategy showing that you're delivering some kind of clear differentiation versus the millions of other products out there already. Now I have to be honest, most startup companies tend to do this stage fairly well. Perhaps it's inevitable that they may not fully understand what they're seeing or make some mistakes in that analysis just through maybe a lesser experience of the industry. But there are a number of ways that companies can and should be researching and formulating good strategies. So the first one is research, and like the most obvious thing to do is to visit stores of various different kinds. Now, obviously, depending on at the time of recording, we're nearly a year into the COVID-19 pandemic. Vaccines are starting to roll out. Hopefully some people will be listening to this and be laughing at the distant memory, but hey, this is where we are at recording. So like right now, today, for instance, depending on where you are, you might just be able to go online and search through online stores. But when you can visit physical stores, do that, and go through different types of stores. So mass market, generalist retailers like the Walmarts, Carrefour, Tesco, these kind of companies, specialist toy shops, that are chains, independent specialist shops, bookstores, petrol stations, basically anywhere where they sell toys. Then think through your plan and think about all the things you've seen, and then work out how you're actually going to be different or better than everything else out there. The reality is lots of people have products which are kind of the same as various competitors, but it does help. It is normally a quicker path to success to have some kind of differentiation. So I think that's one of the most important questions that we ask startup companies is, look, how is your brand or how are your products different and or better than everything else out there? Second factor would be to develop a compelling company story to tell, and then to get really awesome at telling it and selling it. So, look, the bottom line is this is a product-driven business, and in the end you have to sell a product. But sometimes telling a compelling story is a more powerful way to influence, even like the most cynical of retail buyers. If you say, I've got another product and it's this price and it's got these features, okay, they may or may not be interested. But if you tell them a bigger story, like, try and think of an example. There could be millions of examples. How you're, revolutionising kids' lives, how you're maybe helping the environment, how you're basically helping retailers. Like, there needs to be some kind of story and vision behind it that you can tell, because it just gets people interested and steps you beyond just, here's another product. Just to put it in context, like the average retail buyer, I would be surprised if they're not looking at many thousands of toys. In some cases, it'll be in excess of 10,000 toys in order to select a few hundred, or even less in some cases. So you've got to find a way to step beyond and above the usual noise of, here's a catalogue, do you want to buy my products? You still need to do all that, and you need to do it really well. But yeah, developing a really compelling company or brand or product story is in my experience, critical to kind of success. Factor number 3. So as I said, this is a product-driven business above all. So whatever else you get right or wrong, make sure that you develop really compelling play experiences with a motivating commercial proposition for both, customers of all kinds. And in the end, that is kind of the key success factor. Make a fun product that people want to buy and that they want to use. That's generally speaking the best way. Now, there is so much within that in itself. I could do 100 podcast episodes on how, like, what makes for a good product, examples of good products. We don't have time for that in this, but effectively you can get everything else right, but if you don't have a really good product stream, then basically you're not going to last for very long in the toy business. So factor number 4, I've written 3 pleases here in my kind of mini script here, which is please test your products with children and parents of the target age before you spend any big money and before you really start trying to sell. Okay, there are a number of really basic questions. Again, I could talk for a long time about this, but I've just listed 4 very simple, in fact 3 very simple questions. Question number 1, is your product conceptually appealing to the target audience? Like, is the general idea of it actually going to appeal to them? Doesn't matter if you like it, doesn't matter if your kids like it, but get out there and ask a cross-section of people. If you know families who are affluent, who have a lot of money and highly educated, talk to them. If you know families that don't have a lot of money and not a lot of education, talk to them. If you know people in different parts of the country you're in, or even different countries if you can, talk to them. Find out, is there actually any general interest? And also try and do that in a bit of a competitive context. What about this? What about that? Here's this product. How does it compare with those? That's the type of thing. Then also, have a look. Ask them, there are already some of the products they know that are like yours? Are there some that most obviously come to mind? Because sometimes that can surprise people. You might think you're competing with one thing. You might think well, good luck if you are, but you might think, for instance, you're competing with Barbie. But maybe it turns out you're competing more with a completely different category of product from the consumer's perspective. The consumer doesn't see things the same way as people within the business necessarily do. So, yeah, it's always a good question to ask. And then probably this is the third and last of the questions I've listed, but probably the most important is, can children, if they are the target, actually use the product, and do they find it fun? Like the amount of toys, even for quite large toy companies sometimes, that there's some fundamental reason why children can't use the product or why they wouldn't find it fun. And because the company's never bothered to ask the end consumer, they don't find out until they ship a load of product, and it maybe sells okay to start with, but then doesn't really sell any further. So there are many, many more questions you can ask though. So in my time, personally, I've conducted over 1,200 focus groups with children and parents on toys. And not a single one of those, have I ever experienced one of those groups where I didn't discover something new about the category, about children and the way they interact with things and toys, about the way marketing works, like just something. So whatever you do, just talk to the end consumer, because the big advantage which big companies have is they have a lot of marketing spend, and when they're established, they can also do more formal research as a more integrated part of their product development scheme. So the only thing is, when you start out, is the one thing you can do is the work, and like the work includes talk to some people who actually might be the target consumer. And if they tell you it's rubbish, or more importantly, like with children, especially the younger they are, if they just sort of wander off and start doing something else, something is not compelling enough about the product, so you've got to fix it. Okay, so that's factor 4. Factor 5, create effective sales collateral. So when we consult with companies, probably I would say 3/4 of them either don't have sales collateral to give us, or send us sales collateral that's disjointed, not well thought through, not very well presented, or like graphically designed. And then it basically means it's much harder to sell it. If the person you're sending it to needs to do a lot of work to understand what you have, you're not going to sell much, because they're looking at so many products. So have really succinct sales collateral, showing products, what they are, benefits, functions, and key data like age target, price points, that kind of thing. Also nowadays you would generally expect that people will create videos which bring the products and the brand to life when you can't be there to present in person, which is quite often, and especially in some places right now because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Factor 6, this is the only one of these factors that I've written with an exclamation mark on my notes, and that is quite simply sell. Okay, if I had to say what's the best advice I can give to a startup in a toy game business in one word, it would be sell. And it's kind of obvious, in fact it's blindingly obvious, but really you're not in business until you sell something. All the fun bit is coming up with the concepts and designing a logo and developing some products that you think are cool. That's a fun experience, but you're not actually in business until you sell something. And you really do need to grow the sales revenues to have any chance of building a successful business. I have seen some kind of hobby businesses, and they start very, very small, and they maybe stay very small, but that's still fine, because that's what the people are interested in doing. But if you want to build a business, you need to sell. So yeah, like I say, the most important department or function to begin with, and for quite a long time after in a toy company, is sales. I think you also have to be realistic though. And okay, there's lots of talk about, fake it before you make it and reach of the stars and all that kind of stuff, which is fine. But most people don't sell to Walmart, Carrefour, Argos, those kind of retailers in year one. In fact, generally it might be 3, 4, 5 years or even more later before you even get a conversation with some of those guys. So, to grow international distribution, or even to hit all the key retailers in any one market, it is going to take time. Typically, if it's a success and it goes quickly, that's like 3 to 5 years, and that's a long time. People don't realise, because we have an annual selling cycle in the toy business, so it does take time. Okay. So yeah, like I say, if there's only one thing that we highlighted on this entire podcast, it would be sell. But okay, it's kind of obvious. What it isn't is easy. So good luck with that one. So yeah, number 7 is finance and cash flow, obviously critical. Any MBA course or Harvard textbook will tell you this. Like I said, there's an annual selling process, and what people often don't understand is that means that you spend a year working on a product line and presenting it, and then you get money back. Most often in a big lump, about once a year. Okay, maybe it's sort of 2 or 3 month period, 3-4 months sometimes, but basically that is a massive cash flow strain, and that's one of the fundamental challenges to startups in the toy and games business. It takes a long time until the next time that the money comes flowing in. So if you screw up on product launches, if you have too much inventory, anything which ties up your cash or stops you getting cash back is basically going to make it very difficult for you to continue. And okay, you can go and raise money, but every time you raise money, you own less and less of the business normally. So yeah, be careful. Be cautious, especially on sales forecasts. I've never actually done a sales forecast that was right. It was always up or down. And in the end, the only variable is, was it too optimistic or too pessimistic? It's better to be too pessimistic, and then even more pessimistic again is better to be like blindingly pessimistic, because to be slightly out of stock, okay, you lose some sales, but it's not a bad thing, because then demand is there and it shows that people want to reorder, and then you start to get orders to back up reorders. But, the bottom line is it's freaking hard to sell, especially when there's already thousands of other established toy and game companies out there already. So you have to watch your cash flow when you start up, especially. But even after that. Number 8, which I kind of hinted on there, touched on, was be cautious on inventory. So bottom line is excess inventory kills toy companies. And cash tied up in stock in a warehouse is not helping your business. It's costing you money one way or another in terms of warehousing. And like I say, it's better to be just out of stock than massively overstocked. You'll find that big toy companies are ruthless when it comes to stock. Even like massive well-known brands, you'll find in clearance retail channels if they've ended up with too much stock. Because basically what you need is cash flow, and inventory is the primary kind of drain on cash flow. So just to put it in context, typically, and this is like a rough approximation, but say approximately a third of the revenue of a toy company is normally spent on manufacturing stock or buying stock. So that's by far the biggest cost area. People might be, depending on the size of the company, 5 to 15%. Marketing might be, well, depends on the company, 0 to 15%. But basically inventory is the biggest. So whatever you do, be cautious on inventory. It's much, much, much easier to order it than it is to sell it. Let's put it that way. Okay, so key factor number 9 is you need a really strong team with no weak links, and that's especially important at the beginning, because you just, if you miss a selling cycle, it sets you back. Over time, it sets you back a year or even sometimes a couple of years in terms of delayed progress. You need a good communication dynamic between you, which blends kind of your collective strengths so that you balance out individual weaknesses. Finding good people you can trust isn't always easy. I think that's pretty much a given, but it's critical. So take great care. Hire with a great degree of care at the start. Later on, big companies kind of just have to fill a role, and you're not going to get all superstars. If you employ 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 people, it just doesn't really happen. But if you've got like one employee, that employee better be good. And if you've got 5, they better be good. So yeah, just be careful hiring. And that's kind of all the factors that we had lined up. So there's quite a lot in there, even though this is going to end up being quite a quick podcast episode. So yeah, I would have a look back, or a listen back through this, and just go through those if you are someone considering a startup or recent startup. Like I say, from our side, we've worked with a lot of toy and game startups, and we've seen a lot of them succeed and go on to bigger things. Sometimes like to $1 billion turnovers, but we've seen a lot more fail. And if effectively managing the areas we've highlighted here, that's kind of like most of the areas of key concern in order to kind of be successful with a toy startup. So we do. I should also clarify, like from our side, we provide a lot of free resources for people in terms of content. This podcast being one. We do struggle to answer every single question that people just starting up would like to have, so we prefer to direct people to those content resources. We do work with some startups, but it tends to be where they've got funding, because we need to see that they can both afford to pay our fees, but also justify it. Like, we don't want to take fees from a company where there is no business and they haven't started yet. It just doesn't really help us, and it doesn't really help you. So yeah, but like I say, there are lots of successful startups out there. If I were to carry on talking for long, I could come up with more factors. Trade shows are a critical part, especially at the beginning when you're building relationships. Learning how to recruit distributors in overseas markets, actually even getting the right distribution model. There's so much depth. It's a huge business in that sense. There's so much depth. But the bottom line is stick with these things, and above all, whatever you do, try and sell. Make sure your pricing's good. Make sure you have a margin. Be pessimistic about sales forecasts, please. And if you follow those, you've got a better chance than a lot of people. So yeah, that's pretty much all that we have for now. So thank you for listening, and I'm going to hand back to myself, funnily enough, to wrap everything up. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed this podcast. The topic was today how to successfully start a new toy business. We do get asked this question quite a lot, and we can't always answer everybody who wants to ask us the question. But we do publish lots of free articles on www.toyindustryjournal.com and www.boardgamebiz.com. We also obviously interview people and place our own thoughts into podcasts herein. So please feel free to consume as much of this content as you like. If you find it interesting, please do share it with your friends and colleagues across the toy and game business. And new episodes and new articles will be coming along very soon. And if you would like to work with us, or you'd like to just find out more about what we do, we suggest going to www.kidsbrandinsights.com/services. If you want to know the main consultancy service we offer to toy companies, then please type into Google Toy Co Growth Booster. It's a bit of a mouthful, but if you type into Google Toy Co Growth Booster, that will show you our core consultancy service. So that's all for now. I've been your host, Steve Reece. This has been the Playing It Business podcast, and we will see you next time.
Playing It Business with Steve Reece, the business podcast with a sense of fun. To find out more, go to playingitbusiness.com.